Happy Unicorn Day!
If you would like to learn about fairy folklore, delve into modern fairy faith spirituality, and explore fun and fanciful fairy-themed events, please subscribe to Fairy Fortunes for new videos every Friday.
Hello, my fair friends. I'm Ruby Ruse, and on today's episode of Fairy Fortunes, we're going to be talking about Unicorn Day. I found out about Unicorn Day as I was putting together a bullet journal. Now, a bullet journal is a spiritual practice that I've seen floating around on Instagram and on YouTube. And if you'd like to see my bullet journal, I would invite you to check out my blog. I will have a link for you down below in the description box that will take you to my blog post that will show you my bullet journal thus far. So one of the things that many people do in bullet journaling is that they create a calendar for each month. So I was putting together, of course, my April calendar, and I was looking for some interesting things to put on that calendar, and I came across Unicorn Day, which occurs on April 9th. Now, there is a beautiful book called Unicorn Day that is a picture book that was written for very young audiences by the author Diana Murray. This book was published in 2019. Another author by the name of Camelia Benko has written a series of books called The Unicorn Quest, and the first book in the series is of the same title. This series launched in 2018, and in 2020 the author was publicizing her third book in the series and created an online event that was in promotion of Unicorn Day to celebrate her thriving book series, The Unicorn Quest. However, as amazingly talented as these authors are, they are not responsible for the creation of the Unicorn Day holiday. As I mentioned, Unicorn Day, the picture book, was published in 2019, and Camelia Benko began her series, The Unicorn Quest, in 2018. Now, from what I've collected on the internet, the Unicorn Day holiday started trending in 2015. Now, the earliest reference that I can find to Unicorn Day is an article that was written in March 2015 announcing the launch of a brand new bake shop, the Ramona Susan Bake Shop in Philadelphia. Now, what's very telling about this bake shop is that they launched their website on April 9th, 2015, and in correlation with that launch of their website, they were celebrating Unicorn Day. They were offering their beautiful custom-made unicorn cakes, and they also offered cupcakes delivered by Unicorn Cupcake Delivery Service. Now, I did reach out to the Ramona Susan Bake Shop to ask them if they perhaps were responsible for the Unicorn Day holiday, but they declined to comment. So I do not know for certain if they were the ones responsible for creating the holiday, but I do think it's telling that the very first mention of Unicorn Day was in conjunction with the opening of their beautiful website and bake shop. We'll have a link below to their website. Do check them out on Instagram. And if you are in the Philadelphia area, order one of their cakes and do please tell me how they are. But regardless of where we get the Unicorn Day holiday, unicorns are beings worthy of having a day to celebrate them because they are one of the most interesting of all folklore fairy creatures because they are one of the very few who traverse both Eastern and Western folklore stories. Now, most of us are familiar with the Western unicorn that is said to resemble a horse with a lion's tail and a single horn protruding out of their forehead, but there is a similar creature featured in Eastern mythology. Now, in China specifically, they have a being that is attributed to being a unicorn, and it's called a qilin. Now, as I understand it, It's made up of two words, ki meaning male and lean meaning female. And what's interesting about this is that there is also a biblical reference to a unicorn being referred to as the reem that is said to have only one single mated pair throughout the world at any given time. Then they would mate and have a male and female offspring, and then the previous adults would then pass away. Now, the reem is said to be a Western unicorn and is the reason that the unicorn features so heavily in Western heraldry in the medieval times. However, in modern context, biblical scholars now think that reem is a mistranslation. It was not unicorn, but reem meant ox in that context. And they now think that when a reem is referred to in the Bible, they are talking about the auroch, which is a species related to cattle that is now extinct. The definitive characteristic of the unicorn is, of course, that single horn in the center of the beast's forehead, and it is one of the primary sources of their magical powers. The horn of the unicorn was said to have healing ability and also was said to cleanse any liquid of poison. Now, in medieval times especially, the narwhal was hunted relentlessly. Their tooth was passed off as a unicorn horn and was used to cleanse liquids of poisons. Other attributes of the unicorn are strength, purity, and immortality, which, when coupled with that misinterpretation of the word reem in the Bible, it became associated with the Messiah figure in the Bible as well. Now, it seems to be canon that unicorns are associated with virgin maidens. Why is that? Well, that is because in 1590, Spenser wrote the very famous epic poem, The Faerie Queene. And that is where we get the reference that unicorns are drawn to virgin maidens, and the unicorn will then come to the maiden and be tamed. But what Spenser was really doing is that this epic poem was really written for Queen Elizabeth I, who of course was the great virgin queen who married her country of England. She was the basis for the Faerie Queene in that epic poem. Now, obviously, Elizabeth I did not have any children of her own, so James IV of Scotland actually became James I of England and Ireland as well. Why that is particularly significant when we're talking about unicorns is that the medieval crest of the Scottish kings was the unicorn, and wait for it, to this day, the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland. This is absolutely true. It is. I know. In Australia, they have kangaroos as their national animal. In America, we have the great bald-headed eagle. And in Scotland, they have the powerful unicorn as their national animal. This is absolutely true. I do have resources and links for you in the description box down below, so do check this out. If you have the privilege of going to Scotland, you will be able to see many historical sites that include unicorns, and most of these unicorns, specifically from the medieval times and Renaissance eras, will depict the unicorns with golden chains somewhere around them or around their necks. And the reason for this is that those chains were said to represent that unicorns could not be tamed except by the rightful king of Scotland. And so whoever bore the crest of the Scottish king would be able to subdue the unicorns. And what I find very interesting about Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen poem is that Queen Elizabeth I, being a virgin queen, it was simply her presence, not any might or any aggression or her sword or her strength, merely her presence would tame the mighty unicorn. And I do think that Edmund Spenser was alluding to the fact that Queen Elizabeth had even greater power than the Scottish kings who eventually succeeded her. The unicorn was said to be the arch enemy of the lion. Now, where I think this story comes from is it really was more about politics than it was about folklore. Because while the unicorn represented the country of Scotland, the emblem in heraldry for England was the lion. And so what I think that story represents is it was a political comparison. The fight between the lion and the unicorn was the fight for rights and land between Scotland and England. Now, I am partial to unicorns, not only for their significance by traversing both Eastern and Western folklore, but also the unicorn is featured on the Fairy Fortunes divination deck. Albus the Alicorn. Alicorn being a British-specific variation of the word unicorn. Now, in the context of the Fairy Fortunes divination system, the figure of Albus the Alicorn is to represent concepts of purity, of receptivity, and also observation. Whenever the unicorn makes an appearance in a reading, it's usually a caution to step back a little bit from the situation, stop talking so much, and observe. We should never underestimate the power of silence, the power of observation. Sometimes there's more power in that than there is in aggression. So what actually inspired the image of Albus the Alicorn is actually the 1982 animated film, The Last Unicorn. The whole story of how the last unicorn is transformed into a human female was so poignant and moving to me that that image very much stayed with me. And so the Albus the Alicorn image on the Fairy Fortunes deck is actually a homage to the Last Unicorn movie. As beautiful as the 1982 animated film of The Last Unicorn is, I'm going to tell you that the book written by Peter Beagle is even more poignant and beautiful than the animated film. So while I highly recommend the film, I also must implore you to read this modern fairy tale story. I have some very strong opinions about The Last Unicorn. I think there's a not so secret hidden inside of the story. So if you would like to have that discussion with me, by all means, go for it in the comments. See if you know what the secret is that I'm referring to. But my personal favorite movie that I highly recommend for you to enjoy the holiday of Unicorn Day would be the story of Legend. Legend was a movie that was made in 1986. What is beautiful about this film is that it is a cinematic media only. It was created as a screenplay. In the 1980s, they were experimenting with fantasy films. The makeup, the costuming, and the screenplay itself is just a beautiful fantasy artwork piece, and I highly recommend it. It is one of my top favorite fantasy films of all time. I do want you to check the description box of this video. I will have links to my top 10 favorite fantasy films, and also there is a link to a blog post I wrote on my favorite fantasy fiction books. If you go and you read my lists and you find that I am missing your favorite fiction work on unicorns or other furry creatures, I invite you please to make a comment on this video or send me an email telling me about your favorite fantasy book or movie. Either one. I want to know. And a very interesting bit of trivia for you is that a group of unicorns is called a blessing. So may you share in a blessing of unicorns on Unicorn Day. If you like this video, I think that you would also enjoy the video that I previously mentioned, my top 10 best fantasy films of all time. One of the main focuses of the Fairy Fortunes YouTube channel is, of course, on folklore, but more than making it just mildly educational entertainment, I do hope to inspire specifically an adult audience. Because magic and fantasy are not just for kids. Imagination is what inspires us to shape and change the fabric of our very lives. And that's magic. Before you do anything at all, you have to believe that you can. I do hope that you'll visit my website, fairyfortunes.com, for more folklore content. And also, please visit me on Facebook and Instagram, where I share something on fairy folklore, modern fairy faith spirituality, and on fairy-themed events almost daily. And with that, have a magical day.